Today I'm going to take you to the resting place of a 21-year-old woman who was bludgeoned to death, left to rot in an area beyond this wall. In January 1978, she met a terrible fate by a local serial killer. Now, we've had special permission to film the area where the crime took place, so do hang around. So before we get into this video, we're fast approaching 2024. We've got some great ideas, great videos to upload. And please do help the channel by subscribing, liking and sharing. So, better still, drop us a comment and let us know what type of videos you like to see.
We're in Manningham, in Bradford, and this corner here is the one surviving piece of the old Woodbury Road. It's an area that's long since been redeveloped, and there were a lot of houses down here that have been demolished. And back in the 1970s, a 21-year-old prostitute lived here by the name of Yvonne Pearson. She lived here with two small children, but she went on to become more well known as the 7th murder victim of the Yorkshire Ripper. And that was a murder case that was quite baffling and quite bizarre in a lot of ways. So what we're going to do is we're going to take you through the story, through the murder trail, and we're going to take you to Yvonne's grave, a final resting place. So we're on Lumb Lane, and back in the day this was the heart of the red light area in Bradford. And Yvonne Pearson was said to be a rather cautious prostitute, but she also had a few weird clients. She had one that liked to have cigarettes stubbed out on them. But anyway, on the evening of Saturday the 21st of January 1978, Yvonne was down here and she went to what was then known as the Flying Dutchman pub. So it was here inside the Flying Dutchman where Yvonne had a drink, and she announced to friends that she was going to leave the pub because she was going to go out and make some money. The building behind me is another long lost pub on Lumb Lane. This was known as the Queen's, and it was another favourite haunt of Yvonne Pearson. When Yvonne left the Flying Dutchman pub, that was actually the last sighting of her by her friends, but there was one further sighting here at the junction of St Mary's Road and Church Street. And around 9 o'clock on that Saturday evening, a motorist was driving on here, and he said that he saw Yvonne shouting across the road to a young, short Asian chap. What we do know for sure about that evening is that Peter Sutcliffe was driving along Lumb Lane from the Westgate end, and he had to stop at this corner here of Southfield Square because a car was reversing out onto Lumb Lane. And whilst he was waiting, Yvonne Pearson was on the pavement at the side of his car. She asked him, did he want business? And he told her, get in. Now that was a very, very cruel twist of fate, because Peter Sutcliffe was out that night, but he was driving home. He wasn't out looking for somebody to murder, and he only had his hammer in the car. In Peter Sutcliffe's later confession and statement to the police, he said, Yvonne had got into the car. She suggested that I turn the car round, and she told me where to drive. I drove back along Lumb Lane, past Drummond Mill, turned right down a road onto White Abbey Road, and I was directed to turn by Yvonne left into a street behind Silvio's bakery. I drove to the very end of this street where there was a large open space, like a parking space, and parked the car. So the road that Peter Sutcliffe drove down was Arthington Street, and that's where we are now. Drove to the end of this road, and Peter asked Yvonne how much did she want, and she said it depends on what you can afford. £5 for a good time, or if you want a really good time, £10. Then she asked Peter, shall we get into the back of the car? And that was the last thing that she ever said. The following is an extract from Peter Sutcliffe's statement to the police where he describes the actual murder of Yvonne Pearson. He said, we both got out and she went round to the back door of the car on the near side. She tried to open it, but it was locked. I opened the front passenger door, reached in and opened the rear door catch. As she opened the door, I hit her from behind twice on the head with the hammer. She fell down and started to moan loudly. I dragged her by her feet, on her back, about 20 yards or so, to where there was an old settee lying on its back on some spare land. When I got her to the settee, she was still moaning loudly, At that moment, a car drove up and parked next to my car. I saw there was a blonde woman in the car and a man driving. To stop her moaning, I took some filling from the settee, I held her nose and shoved the straw into her mouth, then I shoved it down her throat. I was kneeling behind the settee, hiding from the motor car, keeping hold of her nose. The car seemed to be there for ages before it drove away. I stayed still, petrified with fear, whilst the car was there. When the car had gone, I was seething with rage. Her jeans were nearly off because she'd undone them at the car, and when I was pulling her by the feet, I nearly pulled them off. I think I kicked her hard to the head and body. I was senseless with rage, and I was kicking away furiously at her. After this, I remember acting very strangely. I talked to her and apologised for what I'd done, but she was dead. I put the settee on top of her. I was very distraught, and I was in tears when I left her. This was the first time I'd apologised to someone I'd killed. And so it was at this very spot, which is now occupied by Lugman's Autos on Arvington Street, where the body of Yvonne Pearson was discovered beneath a sofa. She was discovered on Easter Sunday, which was the 26th of March 1978, and her body had been here for 2 months. In fact, during that time, Peter Sutcliffe had committed another murder of 𝗟𝗘𝗙𝗙 over in Huddersfield. I did say at the start of this video that this was a murder case that was a little bit bizarre and a little bit strange. And one of those things which leads you to that conclusion was the fact that beneath the hand of Yvonne Pearson, who was badly decomposed by this time, there was a copy of the Daily Mirror placed beneath her hand, which was dated the 21st of February 1978. That was a full month after she first vanished, and more than a month before her body was discovered. So somebody had clearly been to this site and placed a newspaper with the body. That was put to Peter Sutcliffe, and he actually denied it. He said it wasn't him, but as we now know, Peter Sutcliffe was sometimes economical with the truth. I think he was fond of creating mysteries, perhaps. He didn't always own up to everything that was attributed to him. And another strange thing is that because Peter Sutcliffe hadn't gone out that night with the intention of committing a murder, he didn't have his screwdrivers or his knives with him, although he did have the hammer. The body, when it was discovered, it didn't bear the hallmarks of a traditional Ripper victim, which led the police to believe that it wasn't actually part of the Ripper's victim lineup. And there was actually some emphasis put on locating the Pakistani fella that Yvonne Pearson had been seen shouting at up on Church Street. They thought he might have been the killer. Of course, the whole thing was eventually confirmed to be a Yorkshire Ripper killing, and that was confirmed by Peter Sutcliffe himself 3 years later when he was arrested.
Right, I've just arrived at the 𝗟𝗙𝗙𝗙𝗏 Cemetery in Leeds, and I can see Mark just across there. We've got a freshly dug grave here, a funeral about to start in a few minutes, so as you can see. So I've just seen Mark, funeral about to take place in a few minutes.
Yeah.
And let's have a look at this grave here.
So here is the final resting place of Yvonne Pearson, buried in Leeds because that's where she was from originally and her family wanted her to be buried in Leeds. We've got a date here. She died on the 26th of March. That was the date where the body was discovered, and as we now know that she was murdered a couple of months before then, obviously she was buried and this stone was put here before Peter Sutcliffe was arrested in January 1981. But she's resting here. We'll remember Yvonne Pearson today. Rest in peace. You didn't deserve what happened to you.